Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our next matchup for UFC 325. In this matchup, we have Jacob Malkoun taking on Torres, the GOAT Finney. On paper, it's a matchup that looks like experience and technical MMA versus undefeated momentum, as Malkoun, an Aussie veteran with an 8-3 pro record, has been in tougher fights against seasoned competition and shown real good wrestling and BJJ chops. You look at his record, right? He's fought guys like Brendan Allen and AJ Dotson, Nick Maximoff, Andre Petrowski. Sorry, he's fought a good number of kind of well-established middleweights at this point. Meanwhile, you have Torres Finney, who during his early MMA career, on the Contender Series, he made some noise with a good mix of knockouts and submissions early in his pro career. But when you dig deeper, you'll see that their styles lead to very different ways of winning fights, and that's exactly where this matchup becomes interesting. I will also say another thing about Torres Finney. You got to think is again during his rise, he was a bit of a comedic fighter, and what I say is just kind of just watching him fight. At 5'8", he's one of the shortest fighters in the middleweight division. And you look at Torres Finney, he is truly just a little, small, wrecking ball of muscle. Very tight, compact, and ready to explode at any moment. Meanwhile, Malkoun, more of an average build, but like I said, a bit of more of an established UFC veteran. And pretty well-rounded fighter, I will say for sure. So, but like I said, I think this matchup could be interesting on paper. In practice, that's another story. But with that being said, let's get down to the breakdown. First up is Jacob Malkoun, fighting in Sydney, Australia. Brings a well-rounded base of BJJ, wrestling, and boxing to just about every fight. You look at Malkoun's record, his record shows 3 knockouts and 5 decisions, which tells you that most of the time he's not looking for flash. He's looking to control the pace and positioning. And you look at the stats, Malkoun lands nearly 4 significant strikes per minute, which is a solid output for a middleweight, and he absorbs under 3 per minute. His takedown attempts are high, and Malkoun worked that wrestling hard. And even if his accuracy isn't elite, Malkoun uses his grappling to force opponents to engage on his terms. So this is a fighter who pushes action without being reckless, and his experience against ranked foes, like I said, Brendan Allen is the major example, gives him a deeper technical bag to pull off. Now you look at Torres Finney, undefeated, 11-0, 7 knockouts and 1 submission. That looks impressive until you see his UFC debut against Robert Valentine, which was one of the worst fights I had ever seen in 2024. Not the worst fight I've ever seen in the UFC, period. We still have Rose as far as the 2, and Ngannou versus Lewis. But in 2024, that was the worst fight I'd ever seen. As, split decision, it wasn't a split decision. Clearly won 2 of the 3 rounds, but landed extremely few significant strikes. Finney's profile shows he trains wrestling and can grind forward, but inside the octagon, who knows? Maybe it was just a one-off. Maybe he fights more aggressively, and that was just he just laid an egg or something. But inside the octagon right now, he can struggle at times to generate consistent impact on the feet or impose dominant grappling sequences when the shots don't land immediately to takedowns. In his last UFC win, or I guess his only win, let's be real here, Finney landed as few as 4 significant strikes, which is historically low, and just a style built more around control than damage. Now, I will say he is incredibly strong. As you saw, he was able to repeatedly pick up Robert Valentine. But you saw, like I said, in that 3rd round when Finney couldn't get Valentine down, he did not have a good reaction to getting elbowed in the head repeatedly. So here's basically the stylistic contrast. You have Malkoun, who is pretty proactive and varied, mixing striking and grappling with high activity and real positional intent. Meanwhile, Finney's offense is more about wrestling control and opportunistic striking, and he hasn't shown much consistent impact against well-rounded foes. Again, it's weird because some of Finney's wins are actually kind of impressive, if on his Contender Series anyway. For example, You look at the win against Cam Rouston, which granted he wrestled fucked him, but Cam Rouston is pretty good, as well as like submitting Yuri Penvoyev again. At the time, seemed relatively good, and then his last win up until, and then his last contender series fight against Abduli Rami, he smashed that guy with ground and pound. So it just baffles the mind why his fight with Robert Valentine was so damn boring. But again, maybe he just laid an egg and he could be more exciting. That's just a possibility. Now, looking at how they clash, looking at the pace and pressure first, Malkoun's hallmark is pushing the pace with purpose. Malkoun is not just throwing punches. He's using his range, combinations, and takedown level change to make opponents defend from multiple fronts. And that kind of activity forces decisions from a judge. Did you land more? Did you control more? And Malkoun stacks those boxes. Now, Finney's game, by contrast, can flatten pace rather than escalate it. His takedown setups is effective when it lands, but he doesn't consistently threaten big shots if the takedown isn't there. That can stall momentum. On one hand, that control can help win rounds in close fight. On the other hand, it doesn't mean he racks up damage or clear round-winning moments unless he forces a big sequence. And that's a risky play against someone like Malkoun, who not only presses, but also connects consistently. Then you look at the range and striking. Malkoun uses his jab and head movement to set up deeper attacks, and he pushes from outside, draws reactions, then shoots for takedowns or heavier strikes. Finney, while solid on the feet, has yet to shown a high damage output that makes fighters hesitant to engage with him. Now that combination, Malkoun's activity and Finney's low output control, I think would favor the guy who keeps the action moving without gaps. Then you look at the grappling. That's, I think, the biggest factor here. Torres' wrestling and Malkoun's grappling. Now, while Malkoun's wrestling isn't just a single takedown, he does change shots, works level changes, and scrambles aggressively. If the first attempt is defended, Finney has the wrestling tools to secure a takedown, but he hasn't shown dominant top control against high-level competition yet. And yeah, I know you can say, right, he did blanket Robert Valentine for a good portion of the fight. True, Robert Valentine, I don't think is UFC level, though. Jacob Malkoun has shown to be a higher level. So I think that means even if Finney can get Malkoun down, and I do think he will get Malkoun down, I'd be surprised if he didn't. Malkoun is still dangerous off his back and can work to reset or reverse. I think that kind of threat forces Finney to commit more energy. And when Malkoun gets as his hips underneath, he can change the direction of the fight. And then finally, defense versus volume. This is a key technical point. Finney's style tends to minimize risk and damage on him, but sacrifices active offense. Malkoun's style maximizes engagement with intent. And when I think you're scoring rounds, a fighter who lands more significant strikes, changes offense, and controlled position is generally seen as the one winning the fight. I think in this matchup, that likely favors Malkoun's activity and fight control. So, for my official prediction, I'm going with Jacob Malkoun all the way. I think Malkoun can dictate the flow early, mixing his jabs, his hooks, level changes that force Finney to either react or retreat. And if Finney shoots for a takedown, I think Malkoun has the scrambling and defensive instincts to keep the fight competitive and not just lay on his back. Even on the feet, Malkoun's consistent striking volume will stack rounds in his favor. Now, Finney can absolutely win for sure. He knows how to win. He's undefeated for a reason. But I think his style becomes less effective if he isn't creating strong, prolonged control or possibly even getting a big finish. And he has a guy who's already used to wrestling with tough middleweights and pushing the pace. That's a tall order. So I think technically speaking, Malkoun's activity, range control, and wrestling give him the clear path to victory here. So once again, I'm going to pick Jacob Malkoun. I'm going to pick him via decision. I don't really know if he can finish Torres Finney. I mean, now I don't think I've seen Torres Finney get really, really hurt in any of his pro fights. And Malkoun could be the guy to do that, but at the same time, I don't really know if Malkoun is going to finish Torres Finney. as Malkoun himself isn't really a big finisher. Now, his last finish was a weird one when Petrowski, went for the takedown and hit his head on Malkoun's hip. I don't know that's going to happen here. So I think my official prediction is Jacob Malkoun, and I'm going to pick him via decision in this fight. But with that being said, that's been my prediction of this matchup. If you enjoyed the fight, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think is going to win. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. I thank you all for listening. And remember, stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see y'all next time.